Up until now, we dealt mostly with client code, but it's time to look at the full stack and leverage the work we did in Spring Boot for this application as well. We'll use the same server code as the restaurant app we built earlier. This simplifies a lot of details, although in long-term scaling it might be a hindrance. I don't think this is the time to think of that. Premature optimization might not be the root of all evil, but it sure slows down your project. One huge benefit is that we can just set up the restaurant code directly into the database and reuse some business logic between the apps. Again, this is a depth-first implementation with the goal of getting something working and building up from there. This applies to the server just as much as it applies to the client. In order to fetch data about a restaurant, we use a unique restaurant ID. Since the information is public knowledge, that's not a problem. Purchase uses its own key, so it's secure in that sense. However, when we want to edit a restaurant, we'd want a completely different and separate key to work with, and that's where the secret key comes into play. We can't use the restaurant ID in order to edit a restaurant details. It's something that any person who reverse engineers the application or its communications protocol can discover. We could use a password scheme, but that would be a hassle to manage. Edit, reset password, etc. It's much easier to just generate a completely secret, unique ID. This is effectively a key that only the restaurant owner has, but it's internal, so he is unaware of its existence. The second key is used for write requests to the server, and thus it's meaningless for the regular restaurant app, which is unaware of it. This is actually pretty simple in the code. We add a secret field and a new find by secret method. The main challenge is in maintaining the discipline of working only with a secret when changing data. Normally, when we add data like a dish, you would expect the submission to include both the image of the dish and all the properties. It's possible, but I was having issues with Spring Boot and multi-part request conflicting with the JSON parsing. It's probably something I could have solved, but I wanted to move forward, so I separated this into two calls. For simplicity, I upload the images in post requests, which is the default for multi-part request, and put the JSON in a put request. When the server finishes a build, it should send a push to the device with a link to the final URL. The URL just points to a file saved in the server local file system where we generated the app. The way the build can run asynchronously and send the results later. This also allows us to implement a build queue. The queue is valuable as we don't want to overburden the server. I'm skipping push at this moment. It's a hassle to implement, and I'd rather focus on the wider picture.